LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out 31 of the weekend's best clips for what should be a really interesting show for you tonight. As usual, my clips come mostly from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. I'll also have some political comedy from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher that was on last Friday night, and I'll even start the show with a clip of Jerry Seinfeld, but you can see all the topics I'm covering listed down in the video description, and if you're watching this as a recorded show, you should see time indexes down there to skip to the topic that most interests you. Today's topics include ISIS and Iraq, with President Obama ordering 450 more troops to Iraq, to the Anbar province, to work on the fight against ISIS, both in Iraq and then there are all the airstrikes in Syria. And so that's the first topic. Then that's just a few clips. There wasn't that much coverage this morning. Then I'll have several clips on the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the TAA and the TPA and not just the TPP and all the stuff that happened in Congress where it failed, where the House of Representatives failed to give President Obama fast-track authority this last week, although there's another vote scheduled for this coming week. Then I'll have several clips on Hillary Clinton, and she had her launch rally at New York's Roosevelt Island in Four Freedoms Park yesterday, and there's some clips of that I'll show in some news reports and some more about her campaign. I'll also have several clips about the Republican field for president in 2016. Jeb Bush is supposed to announce he's running tomorrow, and I'll also have a couple clips of Lindsey Graham that were kind of funny, I thought. Then I'll end the show with several clips on race, both talking about the McKinney, Texas pool party, which wasn't on the Sunday shows, but I'll have a clip on that from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, and then just some more general talk about race and our criminal justice system, both from Real Time with Bill Maher and then a clip of Bill Clinton that I didn't think really addressed what should have been addressed. But first, before I get to those topics, I want to start with a couple clips on the topic of political correctness and liberal political correctness. First, starting as promised with Jerry Seinfeld. He was talking to former Saturday Night Live head writer Seth Meyers, now hosting his late night show, and the clip starts with David Remnick, editor of The New Yorker, talking about controversial New Yorker covers over in this clip.
Your covers, obviously, are cartoons as well. You've had some controversy. This, of course, was a famous Barack Michelle one.
About.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you had some controversy this year with Lena Dunham wrote a piece that was controversial?
Lena Dunham wrote a piece called Quiz, Dog or Jewish Boyfriend.
Right. Very funny piece.
That was really funny.
It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. The ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, appreciated it less.
Yes.
So I had a little bit of a fight with Abe Foxman at the ADL, but you know, it worked out. It was okay.
Are you with your magazine when you sort of court these sort of?
But here's the thing about controversy: you should if you're only putting on the cover bowls of fruit or quiet summer houses or something like that, and never going too far enough. Which is what comedy should often do, is go too far enough and test the limits. Louis C.K. did it on Saturday Night Live just recently, and press the boundaries of taste and decorum, and and push politicians. I mean, this cover came at a time when a sizable percentage of the country thought that Barack Obama was a Muslim, as if there was anything wrong with it. And Michelle Obama was a gun-toting Black Panther.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's your line.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I used what I could get. And it made a big splash.
Well, I will say, comedy. It's interesting. Comedy is, I do think, is supposed to push towards the lines in the medium. There are more people now who will let you know if they think you went over the line than ever before.
Don't I know it?
I mean, you have to feel the same way about comedy.
Yeah, but they keep moving the lines in for no reason.
Right.
I do this joke about the way people need to justify their cell phone. I need to have it with me because people are so important.
Right.
I said, well, they don't seem very important the way you scroll through them like a gay French king. It's just... Well,
That's very offensive to the gay French kings.
well, I did this line recently in front of an audience, and comedy's where you can kind of feel like an opinion. And they thought, what do you mean gay? What are you talking about gay? What are you saying gay? What are you doing? What do you mean, you know? And I thought, are you kidding me? I mean, we can't even... I could imagine a time, and this is a serious thing, I can imagine a time when people say, well, that's offensive to suggest that a gay person moves their hands in a flourishing motion, and you now need to apologize. I mean, there's a creepy PC thing out there that really bothers me.
Now, I actually, and I see there's some discrepancy between when the show started and streamed. I hope everything is being streamed, and you saw my entire introduction and the entire Jerry Seinfeld clip. You can let me know down in the video description if the show started with me saying welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup, and then you saw the whole clip, or if there was some sort of gap in there, because I'm not seeing the correct amount of time that I've been broadcasting for some reason. But what I wanted to say about that clip is that I agree to, I don't want people to be silenced for making jokes that are in bad taste and testing where that line is. I've said on previous shows that I'm kind of in favor of pushing that envelope. But on the other hand, I think that there's nothing wrong with doing an analysis of a joke afterwards, deciding, first you decide when you hear it as sort of reaction whether you think it's funny, and that's an important way to judge a joke. But that, gay French king joke that Jerry Seinfeld was talking about there, that's based on a stereotype of gay men that, in some ways is kind of oppressive to gay men that, who aren't, whatever, with big gestures and like big, love, whatever the gay stereotype is about being, effeminate and having, big gestures and drama queens or whatever it is that he was supposed to be talking about there. And, there are those type of stereotypes that if you use them in humor, they are offensive, and it would be going over the line. You don't hear Polish jokes that much anymore, which used to be a big thing when I was younger and before that. And you think of Jerry Seinfeld's friend, Michael Richards, who was Kramer on Seinfeld. He definitely went over the line and got in some trouble for it. I guess part of it is whether one of the things they say is whether you're punching up or punching down, and which is basically whether you're taking on the powerful or you're taking on people who are powerless, and ridiculing people who are already oppressed or marginalized. And in a way, using a gay stereotype is perpetuating oppression. And not that I would disinvite Jerry Seinfeld from college appearances for making that joke, but I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that analysis, and even recognizing that jokes that use stereotypes that are oppressive to people might not be jokes that are going to be funny in the future. That might not be that bad. If everyone doesn't think they're funny anymore because they don't like the stereotype, then comedians won't make the joke because comedians want to make jokes that are funny. So that's the point I wanted to make about that. I'm going to check in the comment section real quick, and it says so far okay. So Quantum Wrench said so. I will move on to the next clip, which is Bill Maher and Jeff Ross, the roast master Jeff Ross, talking about this clip from Jerry Seinfeld. And you'll see them saying, well, the people who are offended just have to grow a thicker skin. And they talk about the PC police. And, people who are trying to enforce these standards and make people feel bad, who are laughing or whatever, that's one thing. But if people, what about gay men who might be offended by that joke? Should they just shut up and grow a thicker skin and not worry about the stereotype? And would you say the same thing to blacks and Jews? Jerry Seinfeld himself, would he think it was funny for someone to make some joke about stereotypes about Jews? Now, you can make jokes about all those things, but you just have to do it in the right way. Sarah Silverman, who's one of my favorites, often makes jokes about racism and sexism, and sometimes she's making jokes about the taboos, which I think is what you saw Louis C.K. do on Saturday Night Live, which was one of the things David Rebnick mentioned in that piece there, in that last clip. But let me get on to the next clip with Bill Maher and Jeff Ross talking about this same clip from Real Time with Bill Maher. And then I will talk about it a little more after you see that clip here.
I have to ask you one more question, get your take on this. I'm going to address this next week, because it really pissed me off, as anything about political correctness does. But I'm sure you saw our colleague Jerry Seinfeld this week made a statement about how colleges are too politically correct. And by the way, if Jerry Seinfeld is too politically incorrect for you, maybe you should look in the mirror. What is your thoughts on this?
I appreciate Jerry, who's not necessarily thought of as an edgy comedian, sticking up for comedy as an art form. I mean, why do comedians have to water down? Comedy is medicine. It's the best medicine, laughter. You don't want it generic, you want it potent. We have a responsibility to shine a light on the darkest aspects of society. And by the way, Jerry Seinfeld not performing at colleges anymore, there's a lot of hot chicks, good money in colleges. A groan's as good as a laugh. Let's go. Come on.
That's a terrible answer.
Part of it is just having fun.
No, but do you think it's a generational thing? Do you think it's a liberal conservative thing? Because liberals are definitely more PC. I mean, I used to fight with this audience all the time because we used to get the audience strictly from liberal sources. Then we got the audience like from everywhere. And I've had a much better time the last couple of months.
It's good for you. People are sensitive.
Too sensitive.
Why do people have to... Comedians shouldn't have to adapt to change to PC. People that are too sensitive should become more thick-skinned.
You know what it is?
I once did a show for sensitive people. They wanted to become better at taking a joke. That's what was so great about roasting criminals. I was curious if they would laugh at themselves. I think that's the first step towards rehabilitation. And some of these PC police should try that. Laughing, not taking themselves so seriously, not taking everything so seriously.
Well, I'll get to Jeff Ross's roast of the prisoners in a county jail in Texas a little later, 'cause when I get to the question of race, that'll be at the end of the show. But I guess I pretty much already talked about what Jeff Ross and Bill Maher said and the parts I disagree with. I mean, on one sense, I do think people shouldn't be too quick to be offended. But on the other hand, you have to, if you're going to make a joke that plays on racial or ethnic or sexual gender orientation stereotypes, I think that you have to be very careful that you're not perpetuating something that is, you know, prejudicial and oppressive and keeps people from, you know, being accepted in society. That's something that is a real concern. But I guess I said that before, and you can let me know what you think down in the comments section. I know, I mean, I don't think people should be silenced. I'm not a believer in political correctness, which is that you can't say certain things or you get in trouble. But on the other hand, I think that as everyone in the conversation seems to admit, there is a line, and then just the question is, where is the line? And is like a gay French king, is that over the line? I don't know. It's a question, and it's kind of interesting seeing Jerry Seinfeld testing that line, because he's like Jeff Ross and Bill Maher were saying, he's not really that big a line tester most of the time, although I enjoy him and think he's pretty funny. But anyway, I want to move on to the next topic, which a lot of people on the left seem very interested in. It's the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or what's going on now isn't the agreement itself, which is an agreement between the United States and a bunch of Asian Pacific Rim countries on what their trading rules are going to be and how they're going to come up with arbitration for disputes and, you know, whether worker rights and environmental rights and all those things. And I'm going to start off showing a report about how President Obama lost a big vote this week to get this authority. The Trans-Pacific Partnership is that agreement this would be authority for Obama to negotiate it and then get an up or down vote from Congress without them being able to give any amendments. And then there was this side deal, the Trade Adjustment Authority, which would have helped workers who are displaced by this agreement and involved spending money. And that was the deal that got through the Senate, where Democrats voted for them both. They got Democrats on board by putting them together, the Fast Track Authority and then this Aid for Workers. And what happened in the House is Democrats refused to vote for the Aid for Workers because they knew that if they didn't both pass, then it wouldn't match what the Senate did. And so the whole thing, the House and Senate versions have to match. And even though the Republicans were willing to pass the Fast Track Authority, they didn't vote for the Aid for Workers, of course. And Democrats, well, anyway, here's Chuck Todd explaining what happened. And then I'll talk about it a little more if you see that here.
Welcome back. Whoever wins the presidency in 2016 is sure to inherit the war against ISIS. On Wednesday, President Obama unveiled plans to deploy an additional...
Oh, you know what? I was going to do the ISIS war, the ISIS thing before the Fast Track Authority. I'm sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties today, but I guess I'll hold off on the Fast Track Authority that I just explained because it has more clips, and I just want to do 3 quick clips on what's going on with ISIS in Iraq and the 450 additional troops that President Obama decided to send, and here's Chuck Todd explaining that, and I'll get to Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Fast Track Authority in a few more clips.
Welcome back. Whoever wins the presidency in 2016 is sure to inherit the war against ISIS. On Wednesday, President Obama unveiled plans to deploy an additional 450 U.S. troops to help train the Iraqi army and some non-ISIS-aligned Sunni fighters. On Thursday, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Martin Dempsey, revealed the Pentagon is actually considering establishing what he calls lily pad bases near the front lines in Iraq, a move that may require even more U.S. troops. The headlines, of course, this week have been damning when it comes to ISIS. And watch this. Military experts and many Democrats being highly critical of the leader of their own party's approach to the war.
We don't yet have a complete strategy.
Waiting on the Pentagon for a plan is not where it should begin. Where it needs to begin is it needs to begin at the White House.
Could I put 150,000 soldiers on the ground to defeat ISIS? Yes. But then
if you put 150,000, I am very concerned about mission creep.
Well, there's a real fear about mission creep here.
I'd be much more comfortable in supporting that mission if I knew what the limits of it were.
We've got a lot of questions about this.
Enough is enough. This is how we get started in Vietnam.
I'm joined by...
And I'll have something from Ambassador McGurk in a minute. That's Brett McGurk, who's the ambassador to the coalition against ISIS. But before I get to that, I want to show an ABC report from Terry Moran that was on This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning. This is about 2.5 minutes. He went into the Anbar province, the Sunni area of Iraq. He talked to some of this guy who deserted, and he talked to some of the troops who are facing ISIS. He talked to some of the Shia militia, the Badr brigades, or whatever they're called, and I'll talk about that a little more after you watch that report about how bad things really are over there in this clip.
Iraq's Anbar province, after years of war, a hellish Mad Max landscape, and right now the front lines against ISIS. We arrive at an Iraqi army outpost a few miles north of Fallujah and talk to the Iraqi troops who are staring down ISIS.
How often are you attacked in this position by the ISIS fighters?
Every day, he says. He says he will stand and fight, but Iraq's army time and again has turned tail and run from ISIS. In Mosul last year, in Ramadi last month. Why? Listen to Jafar, a deserter from the Iraqi army. He asked us to shield his identity. Jafar says when he deserted last year, he had not been paid for 7 months, and he even had to buy his own ammunition, and he'd get more only if he could prove he'd killed an ISIS fighter.
In order for you to get more ammunition, you had to bring a dead body?
We had to prove that either we had killed a terrorist or prove we were under attack, he tells me. A 10-year veteran, Jafar told us his army fell apart rapidly after the U.S. withdrawal in 2011.
The Americans have given so much money to train and equip and supply the Iraqi army. Where did it all go?
It was all stolen, he says.
All stolen. It just got stolen. By politicians, by senior officers.
Everyone has done it from their own position, he says. It's now been a year since the fall of Mosul, and life under ISIS there, as this video obtained by the BBC shows, is grim. Shia mosques blown up, empty schools, women forced to cover from head to toe for the first time, Christian homes marked and confiscated. Iraq is now trying to retrain its troops with American help. But meanwhile, on the battlefields, volunteer Shia militia troops are taking over. And when we met them in Anbar, soldiers of the Badr Brigade, some accused of atrocities against Sunnis, they made clear what they think of President Obama's plans.
If Obama sends more American soldiers here, will you fight the Americans too?
I will fight ISIS and the Americans, this man shouts. Jafar, the deserter, like many Iraqi soldiers, he feels different.
What will fix the Iraqi army?
If we bring back the Americans, he says, and then adds,
peace.
For this week, Terry Moran, ABC News, Baghdad.
So that was not a very optimistic report from Terry Moran on ABC, both in terms of how the Sunnis, that Sunni deserter wants American troops back. He sees it as the only way that things are going to get any better, while the Badr brigades, the Shiite militias there, they say that they'll fight ISIS and the Americans. And it sounds like there's a lot of divisions still in the country, which is why I think you hear from Ambassador Brett McGurk, who I was saying would be the next clip. He's the Obama administration's ambassador to the coalition fighting ISIS. And he talked about how they're not trying to create a Jeffersonian democracy. And then, kind of funny, he talks about how it's federalism, which is something that we do get from Jeffersonian democracy. But and the federalism is basically a way of saying that Iraq's going to be split up. I think Chuck Todd even says it's an umbrella over a partition of Iraq in a lot of ways, and he doesn't really deny that. And then the last part is an interesting question from Chuck Todd about how George W. Bush has actually come out and explicitly criticized the Obama administration for not sending in ground troops in another surge, and you'll see that at the end of this clip here.
Facets, including the foreign fighter flow. But in Iraq, we're not trying to make Iraq into a Jeffersonian democracy in a perfect place. Prime Minister Abadi's vision for the government is much more federalism, much more local control. As Sunnis rise up to take on ISIS, they're going to have much more autonomy in their province. It's called a functioning federalism. It's consistent with their constitution. And we've been working with, and I was in Iraq last week.
Right. It's a partition with an umbrella.
Well, it's
three partition, but with a little bit of a federal
It's their
umbrella.
constitutional federalist framework. When I was in Iraq last week, we were talking not only to the central government leaders, but the governor of Anbar province, the local tribal leaders. I just got off the phone with some of our commanders in the field. Now that we're based at Taqadum, we're working with a tribal committee in Anbar. We're going to see over the next week, I think pretty soon, some new tribal fighters coming in to get equipped and to get into the fight.
I want to ask you about something former President George Bush said this week in an interview with an Israeli media outlet. He said this: a fair number of people in our country were saying that it was impossible to defeat al-Qaeda in Iraq, which is ISIS as far as I am concerned. They said I must get out of Iraq, but I chose the opposite. I sent 30,000 more troops as opposed to 30,000 fewer. I think history will show that al-Qaeda in Iraq was defeated, and so I chose the path of boots on the ground. We will see whether or not our government adjusts to the realities on the ground. He's essentially, the first time we've heard him directly, I think, criticize the strategy. He thinks there has to be boots on the ground. Why is he wrong?
Well, Chuck, I've worked closely with two presidents, and I think the strategy we have now, it was a different time. When we were in Iraq before, we were there. We had real authority to do whatever we wanted. We're there now at the invitation of the Iraqi government. We have to work very closely with them. But the decision the president made, again, specifically tailored to what works. We're there to advise and assist, to get Sunni tribal fighters into the fight, to work with Iraqis to reconsolidate and get their plan together. Every time we have advised and assisted an Iraqi operation, it's been successful. In northern Syria, as we speak, the Kurds with Arab Free Syrian Army fighters and some Christian organized units, they're really giving a beating to ISIS, and they're very close to cutting off the main supply route that ISIS has into its capital of Raqqa. So there's a lot going on, Chuck. I think watch the Euphrates Valley over the next 6 months, from Raqqa to Ramadi to Fallujah.
That's where we should judge.
We're going to be focused there.
Those 6.
So I guess there was a little bit of happy talk there at the end, but he set some benchmarks for us to watch what's going on in the Euphrates Valley and see if ISIS is really losing in all these places they've been winning, and if these Anbar tribes get they're up into their fighting shape, and they meet up with the Kurdish Peshmerga and then the Iraqi national forces, which seem to be mostly Shiite militias, or at least those are their most effective troops. And I guess that's why at the beginning of that answer, the Ambassador Brett McGurk was talking about a kind of partition plan with a little bit of a federalism umbrella, which maybe that's where Iraq's going. But I wanted to show those few clips before I got to the next topic. So this is where I'm going to show you several clips on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And as I was a little bit premature in describing before, this involves an agreement across the Pacific Rim with all these countries, not China. It's basically trying to get agreements with, write some trade rules with a bunch of countries so that China doesn't write all the trade rules in Asia. There are some good parts to it, and I am in favor of free trade, but several weeks ago I said that I don't really trust that this is going to be protective of the needs of workers and of the environment, that I just don't trust the people negotiating it to not make it a big giveaway to the corporations, and that's why I've opposed it, and a lot of Democrats have opposed it, and that's why they didn't vote for what would be the good part, this trade adjustment authority that would have helped workers. They decided in the House not to vote for that, even though they believed in it, because unless that passed along with the fast track authority, it didn't match up with what the Senate did. And so that's why it stalled last week, and now they have to have a big turnaround this week. I'm going to show that clip where Chuck Todd gives an introduction about how this failed in the House, and then he brings on his guest, William Daley, who used to be Chief of Staff for the Obama administration, and was also, in the introduction, he gives his credentials and asks him how this is going to be turned around, and he basically blames what happened on labor, and I'll talk about that a little more if you see that correct TPP clip here.
Well, it was an embarrassing defeat Friday for President Obama when many of his fellow Democrats voted against a bill that would have made it easier for him to negotiate a huge international trade deal, specifically one with Asia. This came after the president turned on the last-minute charm offensive in the hours before the vote. Making his first presidential appearance at the annual congressional baseball game, he shook hands, chatted with multiple members who, it turns out, he was not able to persuade to go along with them. He also walked the hallways of Congress the next morning with Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi before she took to the floor to pull the rug out from under him, and ended up explaining why she would not be supporting a key part of his trade plan. And while the trade deal isn't dead, this past week's vote shows cracks in Obama's relationship with his own party on Capitol Hill, and possibly now his legacy. Joining me now is someone who knows a lot about President Obama's dealings with Congress and trade deals. It's his former Chief of Staff, Bill Daley. You, of course, were President Clinton's point man on NAFTA. And this is where I want to start. And I'm going to start here with this amazing set of numbers I want to put up. House Democratic support for trade agreements over the last 20 plus years. In 1993, when you did NAFTA, you got 102 House Democrats to support it. In 1998, that number on trade agreement support was down to 29. I believe that was for a couple of Central American trade agreements. By 2015, yesterday we saw 28 Democrats do it. What has happened here? Democratic Party almost now unanimously anti-trade agreement.
Right. I think obviously the influence of labor, who have been consistent forever that trade deals are bad, and they think they're at the root of all the loss of jobs that may have occurred over the last 30, 40 years. I feel strongly that both from a policy sense and a political sense, it is very wrong for the Democrats to undercut the president at this stage. This deal, though, can still get done in the next couple of days.
Well, so Bill Daley there is kind of a surrogate for the Obama administration, saying that the deal can still get done, and for someone who actually represents the Obama administration, I'm going to move on to the next clip, which is from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. George Stephanopoulos had on Obama's Secretary of Labor, Thomas Perez, and he did a little introduction about what happened on TPP over this week, and then asked the Secretary of Labor, Thomas Perez, how the Obama administration was going to turn this around with so many votes missing. And one thing I noticed about this clip is Thomas Perez says the word confident like, I don't know, maybe 10 times in this answer. I didn't actually count, but way too many times he says that they're confident. I think he's pretty confident that they're going to get this passed, but you can let me know what you think after you watch that clip here.
I will be voting today to slow down the fast track to get a better deal for the American people. Bigger paychecks, better infrastructure, help the American people fulfill the American dream.
There she is, Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi deals the killer blow to President Obama's trade deal, sparking some tough headlines for the president, but can he turn it around this week? Labor Secretary Thomas Perez is here to answer that question. Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining us this morning.
George.
Good morning. You know, we heard the president's press secretary, Josh Earnest, call this a snafu, this loss. But the final vote on that crucial piece of trade adjustment assistance wasn't even close, 128 to 302. So how do you turn that around?
Well, George, a month ago in the Senate, there was a procedural vote to move to the Senate consideration of the bill. It was defeated. And the next day, all the newspapers and pundits were saying that it was a stinging defeat for the president. And it passed the Senate. You know from having worked here in D.C. that the shortest distance theory is seldom a theory that works here in Washington. And so I have every confidence because what the Congress did last week is something that many of your pundits predicted they couldn't do. They passed trade promotion authority, bipartisan in the Senate, 14 senators, bipartisan in the House, 28 House members. That is remarkable. And the thing about the Trade Adjustment Act is Democrats have strongly supported that. The last time it came up in 2011, it was unanimously supported by all Democrats who voted. And so this is another procedural snafu, just like the one in the Senate.
But as you know, Mr. Secretary, the Democrats now see that as a proxy for the overall vote on trade. Only 40 Democrats voted for that trade adjustment assistance. You're going to need about 120 of them if you're going to pass this thing. How do you get that many votes?
Well, we've had conversations throughout the weekend with various people, and I'm very confident that we can find a way. There are multiple pathways here. Again, the shortest distance theory is seldom something that we use in Washington, and this is another example of it. But I'm confident we'll do this because, again, we have bipartisan support on the Trade Promotion Authority, which is critically important. That was perceived by everyone as the highest mountain to climb, and it has been done. And so this procedural hurdle, like the procedural hurdle in the Senate, is something that I think we will surmount. And I'm very confident of that because we continue to have discussions. And this is Yogi Berra. It's it ain't over till it's over, and there's a lot more to be done here. And I'm confident that we will come to a successful conclusion.
Happens if
Well, maybe he didn't say confident 10 times, but he said it too many times in any case. And so that's the Obama administration position, and both that and William Daley, I assume, is kind of giving you the Obama administration position. But I now want to show three different surrogates for Hillary Clinton on talking about the TPP and the TPA and the TAA, which are the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Authority, and then this Trade Adjustment Authority to help workers. What you're going to see now are three different surrogates for Hillary Clinton who came on the Sunday shows to try to explain why Hillary Clinton did not take a position on the vote that happened this last week. It wasn't TPP, it was TPA and TAA, as I was just explaining, and that's kind of their answer. You'll see all three of them try to say, well, she's going to wait for the final deal. And, I actually kind of started with that position since we don't know the details. It hasn't even been completely negotiated yet on what the final deal is going to be. But I thought that was like too wimpy a position, even just for someone who's like a semi-amateur commentator on Sundays, that I should take a position on this vote that's happening, especially because it's splitting the Democratic Party. And like I said, you just have to decide, do you trust that this is going to be in the interest of workers and the environment and the U.S. economy, or is this going to be in the interest of corporations based on how other trade deals have been negotiated, and also the fact that it's secret and there's really very little time to decide once you find out the details when the treaty is presented to the Congress, I mean, that would in a lot of ways be too late. So that's why I think that it's important for Democrats, liberals, progressives, whatever, to take a position against the TPP or against the TPA and the TAA. But here you can see three different Hillary Clinton surrogates trying to explain why she doesn't need to take a position. I'm going to start with John Dickerson, the new host of CBS's Face the Nation, trying to get Robbie Mook, the campaign manager for Hillary Clinton, to take a position. And he basically says she's going to wait for the final deal over in this clip.
Fighter comes up a lot. You've used the word several times. She's talked about the 4 big fights she's going to take. There was a big fight on trade. People took sides. People had very clear positions. She was on the sidelines. Why?
Well, Hillary has not been on the sidelines. Let me say first and foremost, speaking of a fighter, there will be no tougher fighter at the negotiating table for everyday Americans when these trade agreements are being negotiated. So families can trust her to fight hard for them in any of these agreements. But Hillary has been abundantly clear about where she stands on the issue of trade. She laid out 3 key principles and tests that any trade agreement needs to meet. First and foremost, it needs to protect American jobs. Second, it needs to increase wages for workers here in the United States. And third, it needs to be consistent with our national security interests. We're waiting on, there's obviously a trade bill that may be coming. We don't have the exact text. But when we do, she will take a clear position. And in the meantime, she's laid out clearly where she stands on trade.
So that's what I think maybe confuses people, is on the one hand is campaign officials, and you said she's taking a clear position, but then you said she will take a clear position. Bernie Sanders and others, and she's taking clear positions on other things. She's chosen to give speeches to kind of grab an issue of the moment. This is one where people, you know, if it was a clear position, it would be thumbs up, thumbs down. So it's more nuanced than that.
Well, as Senator Sanders said, there's no bill. There's no bill, and the back and forth that's happening right now is about procedures and parliamentary this and that. You can't take a position on a trade bill that you can't see, and so Hillary's trying to be responsible and wait until we have something to react to, but she has been abundantly clear for any trade deal. She has a very clear set of tests that any trade bill will need to meet.
So I don't know if you buy that answer as to why Hillary Clinton hasn't taken a position. It like I said, it's kind of simplistic. It's a good talking point, but it's not really someone who is in the middle of an important political fight and shouldn't. And that's, if she's going to claim to be a fighter, she should take a position. And now I'm going to show Chuck Todd over on NBC's Meet the Press talking to another advisor to the Clinton campaign. This is John Podesta, who also used to be in both the Clinton and the Bill Clinton and Barack Obama administrations. And you'll see Chuck Todd try to get the same answer out of John Podesta. And then he even has this sort of incredulous follow-up where he mentions all the positions Hillary Clinton has already taken in favor of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and that it would be kind of incredible if she came out against it, although it sounds like she might take a position when you get to the next clip from Karen Finney. But let's watch the John Podesta, Chuck Todd discussion on NBC's Meet the Press this morning first here.
There was an exhaustive list of issues that Hillary Clinton rolled out, ideas, proposals, but there was one issue she ducked almost completely, veiled reference to the issue of trade. She has not wanted to step into this fight between House Democrats and President Obama. Why? Why was there no mention of the rift inside the party, and why didn't she not take a position on what is the foremost debate inside the Democratic Party right now?
Chuck, she's been very clear about where she stands on trade. She's laid out a two-pronged test on how to look at trade agreements. First, does it grow jobs, grow wages, and protect American workers? And second, does it protect our national security? That's her position. She said that she wants to wait to see what the final deal is with the the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is the substance of the trade agreement. What we've seen the last couple of days is skirmishes around the process for considering that agreement, but the agreement's not final. So when it is final, she'll render a judgment about that. And she's stated her concerns, but she has a clear standard that it's got to be good for American workers, or she thinks the United States should walk away from it. I think there'll be no tougher negotiator with both our trading partners or with Republicans in Congress than Hillary Clinton if she's elected to office.
Can we credibly assume that she would walk away from TPP, something that she called in 2010 an exciting opportunity, in 2011 a benchmark for future agreements, in 2012 a gold standard for trade agreements, and in 2013 really enhance our relationship with Asia? This does not sound like somebody who's against this deal, yet you're implying she might be. Sounds like you're trying to please labor here.
Chuck, she's also stated that she has problems with the provisions that give special privileges to corporations and not similar treatment to workers and their representatives. She stated her concerns about strong environmental standards, worker protections. The deal's not done. The deal has some good things. It has some concerns, but when the deal is done, she'll render a final judgment. I think what she's saying is that this is one issue amongst, and it's an important issue amongst a lot of issues about how we're going to build our economy, bring it back, make sure it works for working people, see wages rising again. And that's what she laid out in an ambitious agenda, along with her vision for what we need to do to stop the deck from being stacked for those at the top. And, of course, the values that have motivated her entire career and her entire life. Well,
So I thought Chuck Todd did a good job of getting some Hillary quotes there to try to get a Hillary Clinton surrogate to address how she's going to end up being against the Trans-Pacific Partnership when she said all these positive things about it. And that whole question and answer thing and follow-up, that was a little under 3 minutes. The one I showed of John Dickerson talking to Robbie Mook, that was a little under 2 minutes. Now I'm going to show the most tenacious questioner of a Hillary Clinton surrogate on the Trans-Pacific Partnership issue. This is Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace trying to get Hillary Clinton surrogate Karen Finney to answer basically the same question, why won't she take a position? And this goes for a full 4 minutes, and I think I even cut out like 5 or 10 seconds at the end, but enjoy this back and forth. I think Karen Finney actually does a good job of parrying the whole thing, and then like I said, it sounds almost like she's almost announcing that Hillary Clinton may take a position on this. If you listen carefully to the whole 4 minutes, I think it comes around the 3 minute mark in this clip.
Karen, Secretary Clinton says that she is a fighter. So why has she been missing in action on trade, refusing to say whether or not she supports giving President Obama fast-track authority to negotiate a deal?
Well, I think she's focused on the specifics, right? So her position has been, and this is about this trade deal and any trade deal in terms of the underlying deal, and that is any deal has to meet two tests. Number one, she's talked about it last week, she's talked about it a number of times over the last couple of months, that it must protect workers, and that actually must bring prosperity to American workers. And then the second test is obviously our national security interests. And what she has said is that any trade deal has to meet those two tests. And I think what we've seen over the last few weeks is more of a sort of procedural process going back and forth between the House and the Senate, and we haven't actually seen final language. I think that the Secretary believed the President ought to have the right to go to Congress and make his case and try to earn the votes after he made that case. Unfortunately, on Friday, I think what we saw is that didn't quite happen, and so now we'll see where this process goes from here. But again, where she has stayed focused is what will the language of what is the final deal? Let's talk about what would be what's in the final deal. Let's judge
Karen,
it on that underlying
Karen,
deal.
we're not talking about the trade deal here. We're talking about giving President Obama the same authority that President Clinton had on NAFTA, so that when he finally does negotiate a deal, he can give it to Congress and they can either vote it up or down, but they can't amend it. Here is what one of the other Democratic candidates, Bernie Sanders, had to say about that this week.
I think the trade policies have been disastrous. Secretary Clinton, if she's against this, we need her to speak out right now, right now.
The fact is, Karen, that there is a vote coming up this week that on part of the fast track trade authority, whether or not the president is going to be able to negotiate a deal and then give it to Congress so that they can vote it up or down, but without amendment. As I say, it's the same authority that Bill Clinton had. Does Hillary Clinton think that House Democrats this week, in the next few days, should vote with the president or against him?
Well, I haven't spoken to her about the deal, obviously, since what's happened Friday and what's going to happen next week. But again, this is someone who has voted for trade agreements when she thought they were good for the country and against trade agreements when she thought they were bad for the country. And I would just say, Chris, there has been a bit of maneuvering back and forth about the pieces of the agreement. So again,
I'm not talking about the agreement. Forgive me. I'm talking about giving President Obama the same fast track authority that Bill Clinton had on NAFTA. Why would she possibly be against that?
Well, but we're talking about it in the context of this agreement, right? We are talking about it in the context of an underlying agreement.
Of how he can negotiate a deal and give it to Congress. Well, why can't she say whether or not she's for or against it?
Well, I think you may hear, again, we are going to be talking about a lot of issues. I think you may hear her talk about it sooner rather than later, and I'm going to let her be the person to speak about that.
But there's a vote this week in Congress. Doesn't she have to weigh in pretty quickly? Because if there's no fast-track trade authority, the president can't make the deal.
Well, we'll see, won't we? We'll see if she decides that she wants to go ahead and tell us what she wants to say about it.
But as one of her senior advisors, you can't say whether or not she's going to weigh in on fast-track trade authority?
As one of her senior advisors, I think it's my job to let her be the person making the news in her campaign, or let her be the person saying where she is on an issue. And I'm telling you sort of the broader perspective that she has sort of. And again, I do think it's important. You are talking about sort of fast track, but again, the way this has, the political element of this has played out over the last several months, we have had a lot of wrangling. I understand.
So it didn't go on much longer than that. And by the way, I noticed, let me get the...
there was an exhaustive list of issues.
I did have a question here from Dr. Kzilla by surrogate. Do you mean puppet? Asking what I meant when I kept saying that she was a surrogate. And what I mean by surrogate is that that's just a political term. Hillary Clinton has not come out and done these Sunday shows, but what she did this week is she sent out several people from her campaign to answer questions. And on the political Sunday morning shows, they call those people surrogates. It's people who come out at the behest of the candidate or at the behest of whoever isn't coming on the show to answer questions in place of that person. So these are all people from the campaign answering questions on behalf of the Clinton campaign, but they're not the candidate herself. They're a surrogate for the candidate. That's what I mean when I say surrogate. And anyway, before I leave the topic of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, since I showed a couple clips from the Obama administration and then several people from Hillary Clinton's campaign, I want to show an actual Republican take on this. This is over on Fox News Sunday as well. Chris Wallace had on Representative Paul Ryan, who ran for vice president last time around, not running for president this time, but he's head of the House Ways and Means Committee, so he's in charge of a lot of important budget stuff. And he was on talking to Chris Wallace about how this is a big failure of Democrats. And in a way it is, although you have to, the fact that TPP or TPA and TAA, or it was actually TAA that didn't pass the House, the Trade Adjustment Authority that gives money to workers. Democrat, even though that's like a Democratic program, they realized that unless that passed, the whole thing couldn't pass because it didn't match the Senate, and Republicans were only going to vote for the Fast Track Authority, not the thing to help the workers. So they decided they weren't going to vote for that because they didn't want Fast Track to they didn't want the whole thing to pass. and that was supposedly the Democrats turning on the president and making him a lame duck, and you can hear the assumption that this is a big loss for Obama, even though the Republicans control the Congress. Over in this clip.
House Democrats blocked the president on part of the fast-track trade authority deal in the House on Friday. You said it's not over yet. But the vote on this issue, the TAA issue, gets complicated here, but an element of the fast-track trade authority, the vote was 302 to 126. This wasn't close. So how likely is it, how realistic that you're going to be able to get dozens of Democrats especially, but also some Republicans, dozens, to switch their votes in a couple of days?
So let me shed a little bit of light on this. Number one, the heavy lifting is over. Trade Promotion Authority, which is the more difficult part, the heavy lift, it's done. And I'm very proud of House Republicans and the pro-trade Democrats who delivered. We delivered big time. So the tough part is over. The heavy lifting is over, which is necessary. The Democrats abandoned their president, the leader of their party, in droves on a bill and a program that they demanded as part of this, that they have previously voted for unanimously, that they asked as a part of this process. So to me, it was stunning that they would do this to the leader of their party, the president.
But if I may, to answer my question, how likely is it you're going to turn that around?
The president has a lot of work to do with his own party to turn this around, to salvage this. I'm optimistic. I think that this can be salvaged because I think people are going to realize just how big the consequences are for American leadership, for whether or not America is going to lead in the global economy and write the rules, whether we're going to expand markets for more jobs, or we're just going to retreat. Is fear and falsehood going to grip this country so that we can't do anything big anymore? Or are we going to overcome these things? And will the Democrats, I mean, it's ironic. They're the ones who are making him a very lame duck president, his own party. And so he has work to do with his party, and I hope that he can get that work done and we can fix this.
So, yeah, of course, it's blame Obama over on Fox News, and both from the guest and from the host, as I'll show in just a second, they kind of framed it as a big loss for Obama, though it is a problem for him because he did go and try to rally the Democrats, and he didn't get the votes, and there was a lot of talk about that on the Sunday shows. But that's the last clip I want to show on the TPP issue. Now I want to move on to Hillary Clinton's campaign. She had her big rally launch yesterday on New York's Roosevelt Island in Four Freedoms Park. And before I get to some news reports on that, first I want to show a quick clip of the Fox News Sunday intro where they framed her campaign launch as trying to change the subject from the controversies that have dogged her about email servers and the Clinton Foundation, which I thought that was kind of on the biased side. And then you'll see, I let the clip play a little extra where you'll hear Chris Wallace again blame Obama for the loss of the Trans-Pacific Partnership and frame it as a big loss for the Obama administration, even though it is something of a loss. But anyway, here's that first clip on Hillary Clinton's campaign from the beginning of Fox News Sunday this morning here.
I'm Chris Wallace. Hillary Clinton holds her first big campaign rally. But can she change the subject from controversies over private emails and big money?
I'm not running for some Americans, but for all Americans.
We'll get a live report and discuss Clinton's campaign with Karen Finney, a senior official at Hillary for America. Then, House Democrats hand President Obama a major defeat on trade. What happens now?
I'm hopeful that the Democrats understand the consequences and get together with the president and finish this as soon as possible.
We'll talk with Republican Congressman Paul Ryan, who backs the president on trade but opposes him on Obamacare.
I guess you can't mention that a Republican backs the president on anything unless you also mention something that he opposes him on, or they'll never be able to be reelected to office again, or I don't know. But I thought that was kind of a funny introduction from Fox News Sunday. And then I'm going to show the Fox News Sunday report on Hillary Clinton's launch. It has most of the same facts as the subsequent ones I'm going to show from ABC and from NBC. But this is the only one that questions the attendance numbers. I don't know why it is. They say media sources had lower attendance numbers than what came from the Clinton campaign, but they don't mention who those media sources are. So could it be Fox News? It may be there are media sources with lower numbers, but it seems an odd thing to mention in a minute and 45-second report. And they're also the only one that mentioned her actual age. I noticed they also pair up her gender, being female, with the words commander-in-chief, even though she didn't really mention being commander-in-chief. It's something they added in. But anyway, those are my criticisms of the Fox News Sunday report, which of course is the most biased report of Hillary Clinton's campaign launch, although not too bad in this clip.
2 months after entering the 2016 race with a YouTube video, Hillary Clinton held her first major rally and more traditional launch. The setting was New York City's Roosevelt Island, with One World Trade Center behind her podium. The campaign says some 5,500 people turned out for the speech, but media estimates were well below that. In a 45-minute address, Clinton said she was running to be the champion the country needs now.
I think you know by now that I've been called many things by many people. Quitter is not one of them.
Clinton spoke of the impact her mother had on her life, and the 67-year-old noted the chance of being the first female commander-in-chief.
Well, I may not be the youngest candidate in this race, but I will be the youngest woman president in the history of the United States.
The former Secretary of State hardly mentioned foreign policy, and she did not offer a position on the trade fight taking place in Washington. Liberal group Progressive Change Campaign Committee called it a typical Democratic speech, but lacking bold economic vision. Republican Senator Marco Rubio's campaign released a video in response saying, "We cannot go back to the leaders and ideas of the past."
We must change the decisions we are making by changing the people who are making them.
And former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee quipped, quote, "I've answered more questions in the last 2 hours than Hillary Clinton has in the last 2 months." From New York, Clinton traveled to Iowa, the start of a swing through early voting states. Chris?
So, like I said, the bias on that report wasn't too bad. There were a few things I didn't see in the other reports that I pointed out before I played it. Next, I'm going to show how ABC covered it. They had their reporter, Cecilia Vega, who I've shown several clips from. They also had some negative aspects to the reporting. They showed her honesty and trustworthiness numbers and said that she didn't address that in her speech. They also pointed out that she hadn't taken a position on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and I'll discuss those issues a little more after I show the clip. This is, like I said, from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, reporter Cecilia Vega in this clip.
Morning to you. Boy, if this campaign didn't feel official before, it certainly does now. Hillary Clinton landing here in Iowa just hours after giving her first major stump speech of this campaign. Hillary Clinton kicking off her presidential campaign once again. The first rally of her 2016 White House bid. A chance for the former First Lady turned Secretary of State turned two-time presidential contender to reintroduce herself.
I think you know by now that I've been called many things by many people. Quitter is not one of them.
Husband Bill and daughter Chelsea joining her center stage as Clinton got political.
We can't stand by while inequality increases, wages stagnate, and the promise of America dims.
Personal.
My mother taught me that everybody needs a chance and a champion. By 14, she was out on her own, working as a housemaid.
And went hard on policy.
We should offer hardworking, law-abiding immigrant families a path to citizenship.
Clinton saying she has made mistakes, but not directly addressing those controversies hanging over her campaign, like those emails. A recent poll showing a majority of Americans, 52%, do not see Hillary Clinton as honest and trustworthy. Democratic challengers are stepping up the fight. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders on Saturday in Iowa calling out Clinton for still not taking sides in key fights like the trade deal that Democrats in Congress just helped defeat.
I don't understand how you don't have a position on this issue.
Overnight, Clinton landing in the Hawkeye State, too, testing out her new stump speech on the road.
I want to work with you to build an economy that works for everyone.
And Clinton heads to a number of other swing states after Iowa. She is really trying to cement this image of herself as a fighter for the middle class. And the one thing she is not shying away from this time around, as she did in 2008, is her gender. She told that crowd yesterday that while she may not be the youngest candidate in this race, she would be the youngest female president. George.
So, yeah, like I said, that's the report from Cecilia Vega on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning. I thought was not that different from what you saw from Fox News, but missing a couple little aspects. And then the third report on Hillary Clinton's launch, I guess is what she's calling it, even though she announced her campaign in April. This was like her major launch after doing her Scooby-Doo van listening tour in Iowa and New Hampshire. And anyway, this clip from Chuck Todd also has most of the same facts and a few of the same clips, I think. And one thing that sets him apart, he first does this little intro on Hillary Clinton and then goes to one on Jeb Bush that I'll show later. For Hillary Clinton, he says that she's trying to be more Rodham than Clinton. Later, for Jeb Bush, he'll say that he's trying to be more Jeb than Bush. So I guess it's kind of a parallel. Here's the more Rodham than Clinton clip from Meet the Press this morning. Chuck Todd right here.
And look what's missing. One key word, Bush. Hillary Clinton woke up in Iowa this morning, and for those who wondered if she's going to start taking questions from the media, well, we've learned that she will. It'll be local TV interviews all this week throughout the early states. Yesterday, though, in her big speech in New York, she made clear that she wants to tell the story of her life and achievements rather than be defined by her previous campaigns or by her husband's legacy.
America can't succeed unless you succeed. That is why I am running for President of the United States.
On New York's Roosevelt Island, Hillary Clinton attempted to answer a question that she never effectively addressed in her last campaign for the White House. Why does she want to be president?
For everyone who's ever been knocked down but refused to be knocked out.
She's intent to persuade voters she's a progressive champion, more Rodham than Clinton.
But her campaign has been dogged by reminders of so-called Clinton baggage and the perception that her new progressive positions are ones of convenience, not conviction.
In her announcement, Clinton delivered a State of the Union-style laundry list of policy proposals, managing to name-check nearly every interest group within the Democratic Party.
Immigrants, young people, LGBT community, union leaders, Silicon Valley, poor people, people with disabilities, and people of color.
Clinton also decided to take on the issue of age head-on.
Well, I may not be the youngest candidate in this race, but I will be the youngest woman president in the history of the United States.
So yeah, like I said, he's going to go on to do Bush there, and I'll show that clip when I get to the Republican side. But I thought Chuck Todd did a good job of showing both sides. Not as bad as Fox News, but not being just a stenographer for the Clinton campaign, but asking some questions, and especially about her, whether she's really progressive and whether she's really has these more left positions as a conviction, or whether it's convenience, he said in there. And I'm going to show a question he asked John Podesta, again a surrogate from the Clinton campaign, there at the behest of Hillary Clinton, to answer questions. So Chuck Todd brought up a whole bunch of issues that Hillary Clinton has moved to the left on, and asked John Podesta to explain, why should we trust that Hillary Clinton is really liberal or progressive on all these issues. And you'll see his answer that she's been consistent since her law school days fighting for these issues. But if you look at the list at the beginning, I'm not sure that I buy it. You can let me know what you think after you see that clip over here.
since she left law school.
I want to ask you about some of those because the trade issue actually fits in with a whole bunch of changes. Over the last decade, she shifted her position on same-sex marriage, on immigration, on NAFTA, on the Iraq War, on Cuba policy, on criminal justice reform, just a few that she's done recently. These all fit, and they're all to the left, all to the progressive side of things. How should progressives believe these are changes of conviction and not simply changes of convenience because the Democratic electorate has changed?
I don't think there's anybody who's been more consistent in their entire career from the day she left law school, went to work for the Children's Defense Fund, from her work in Arkansas to First Lady of the United States. She's fought for children, for families. She's made her priorities clear, her values clear. You know, times change. A decade ago, I think a lot of people had a different view on marriage equality. Today, the country has shifted. She's at the forefront of saying that that is a right that every American should have. She's gone further and said we need to protect the LGBT community in the workplace. So I think circumstances change. This isn't 1992. It's not 2008. It's 2015. Right. And she'll take positions that are consistent with a long-time set of values that have made her a progressive in the best sense of the word, fighting for working families, fighting for children, fighting for women across this country and across the world.
Now, I don't know, as I've said over the last several months before Hillary Clinton even announced her candidacy, that I have some concerns about Hillary Clinton, even though I think that that she's the most likely nominee, and I will end up voting for her most likely if she is the Democratic nominee. I haven't given her money like I did for Barack Obama back in February 2007, which would have been February of 2015 in this election cycle, and I haven't given anyone any money, and I'm not going to do any work for Hillary Clinton, though I only did a little work for Barack Obama, and unless I get more convinced that she does hold some of those positions more with conviction than out of convenience, and I'm specifically concerned about how she is on civil liberties, how she is on she's too hawkish on foreign policy, and that she's too close to Wall Street. Or those are basically the three biggest concerns I have, and I want to contrast Hillary Clinton's possibility of not having her progressive or liberal ideas with from conviction with a couple clips from Bernie Sanders. Senator Bernie Sanders was over on CBS's Face the Nation. I want to show John Dickerson first talking about Hillary Clinton's launch and then doing a quick segue over to Bernie Sanders and the big crowds he's getting, and then asking Bernie Sanders about these Democratic strategists who say, don't worry about those crowds, he can't win. And you'll see Bernie Sanders' answer over in this clip.
Yesterday, Hillary Clinton was joined by her husband and family at a campaign rally in New York City. But on the campaign trail, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders is the one who's drawing voters out of the woodwork in the Democratic contest. What's he saying that's so interesting? We're going to ask Senator Sanders, who joins us from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Senator, welcome. I want to start with those big crowds you're getting. Any candidate would love those, but when I talk to Democratic strategists, they're pouring cold water on it. They say people aren't showing up because they think you can be president.
Well, I think those Democratic strategists who will be supporting Secretary Clinton are dead wrong. Look, John, the people of this country are profoundly disgusted with the reality that for 40 years, the middle class of this country has been disappearing, that 99% of all new income today goes to the top 1%, that the top 1/10 of 1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. And what the American people want is an economy and a government that starts standing up for the working families of this country and not just large campaign contributors and the billionaire class. And that is why we're drawing large crowds. People want us to stand up, fight back. Enough is enough. And they want a new direction in this country.
So yeah, that's Bernie Sanders explaining his more authentic progressive view, I guess, in the view of a lot of people. And you know, I noticed I've been watching the live comments. I appreciate all of you who joined me for the live show. I think I've had over 80 people, right around 80 at this point, and one person a little while back, I think it's Mach 77.
Another famous last name who's had a rocky rollout will finally...
Here it is. Mach 770, Sanders will never attack Clinton, you see. And Bernie Sanders did say a while back that he would not go negative. He's never run negative attack ads, and he's not going to start now. But you'll see John Dickerson on CBS's Face the Nation did get him to draw a clear contrast between himself and Hillary Clinton. He mentioned her no stance on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, her vote for the Iraq War, the Patriot Act, and I think there are a couple other things that you can see over... Let me make sure I got the right clip here. Here it is.
Let me ask you about Secretary Clinton. Senator, her position is, we haven't seen what's in that bill yet, and therefore isn't it prudent to wait, not just have a hot opinion, but wait to see what's in the bill, and then she'll make her determination. That's her view. What do you say?
Well, John, don't you think it's a little bit silly for members of Congress to be voting yes on a bill that they haven't seen? That is one of many reasons to be voting against this piece of legislation. There is no question in my mind, and I think the minds of most Americans, that what our trade policy has been for many years is to allow corporate America to shut down plants in this country, move abroad, hire people at pennies an hour, and then bring their products back into the United States. It is a failed trade policy, and I would hope that the Secretary joins Elizabeth Warren, Sherrod Brown, and the vast majority of Democrats in the Congress in saying, no, we've got to defeat this piece of legislation.
You're drawing a strong distinction there between your view and Secretary Clinton's view on the question of trade. For voters trying to figure out this Democratic primary, what other issues would you say are ones that you have that kind of strong distinction between your position and Secretary Clinton's position?
Well, I am listening closely as a member of the Environmental Committee to what scientists throughout this country and throughout the world are saying about climate change. And what they tell us, it is real, it is caused by human activity, and we have got to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. That is what almost all scientists who study the issue are telling us. I helped lead the effort in the Senate against the Keystone Pipeline because I think if we're serious about reversing climate change, you don't excavate and transport some of the dirtiest fossil fuel in the world. Secretary Clinton has been very quiet on this issue. I voted against the war in Iraq, and I think history will record that vote as the right vote because it led to the incredible destabilization we're seeing right now. Secretary Clinton voted for the war. I voted against the USA Patriot Act, not because I don't think that terrorism is a serious threat to this country. It is, but I think we can combat terrorism without undermining the constitutional rights and the privacy rights of the American people. Secretary Clinton voted for it. But I think the bottom line is the American people want leadership to take on the billionaire class, represent the middle class. I have been doing that for the last 25 years. People will have to judge the Secretary's role in that process.
You know what? I kind of like Bernie Sanders. I can't say I'm necessarily going to vote for him. I don't even know if it's still going to be mathematically possible for him to win by the time the California primary comes around, or maybe we're earlier in the process. I can't even remember, but I wouldn't mind necessarily voting for him in a primary, and I do see a way that he could show a weakness in Hillary Clinton's campaign if she doesn't shore up her authenticity on the important issues for the base of the Democratic Party. And I think I hold a lot of the views of the base of the Democratic Party. I differ in a few ways that my longtime viewers, I'm sure, know about. But anyway, that's the really the last clip I want to show on the Democratic side, the Hillary Clinton as the prohibitive favorite. I refer to the Democratic side as the Hillary Clinton campaign because Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley aren't, and Lincoln Chafee, none of them have all of them together, I think, have less than 40% of the vote. Hillary Clinton still has more than 60% in most of the polls, but like I said, you never know. I'm going to move on to the Republican field, although, so this isn't really moving on to the Republicans because the first clip I'm going to show is a Clinton clip, but it's not Hillary Clinton, it's Bill Clinton, who had a long interview with Jake Tapper, who debuted as host of CNN's State of the Union. I thought it was going to be Dana Bash for a while, but I guess they chose Jake Tapper as the new host of State of the Union. This was his premiere episode as the new host, just a couple weeks after John Dickerson took over as host of Face the Nation from Bob Schieffer. Anyway, Jake Tapper had Bill Clinton on in this long, I don't know, it was like a town hall interview almost. And then he also had Jeb Bush on, although Dana Bash was actually the one who interviewed Jeb Bush over in somewhere in Eastern Europe, I think. You'll see when I get to that clip. But first, Bill Clinton, in his interview with Jake Tapper asked him to prognosticate on what's going to happen in the Republican field, and he gave kind of all of Bill Clinton's answers are long. I apologize for that. This is about 3 minutes long, but I think what he says is probably true, and he says it in a kind of interesting roundabout way that, like I said, takes about 3 minutes over in this clip.
I know a lot of people in this audience would love for you to put on your political analyst hat. I know you can't look at the Democratic side right now for obvious reasons, but size up the Republican field. What do you like? What do you not like? What do you think is going on there?
Well, there's a lot of them. It looks more like the Kentucky Derby than Belmont. It's I like that horse, American Pharoah. That was amazing. First of all, they got a lot of youth. They got a lot of energy. They got some significant diversity, and they're no dummies. I mean, it's interesting. You know, and they believe what they believe. They still believe trickle-down economics and works better than investment, and their convictions are so great that they're undeterred by evidence, and that's always amazing to me. But they're impressive, and they have some differences of opinion on, like, the national security issues and the incarceration issues and all that. It'll be interesting to watch them debate. I sympathize with the question of how the primary voters are going to decide who to vote for and whether it's fair or unfair for some people to be eliminated from the televised debates. I don't know how you listen to 12 people in a televised debate, but...
Or 16.
Yeah, or however many they got. But here's what I think, that generally Republican primary voters, since you and I have been doing this, wind up voting for the person they think has the best chance to win. In spite of because they figure the Tea Party's taken over the House. They've got all their ideological dreams fulfilled. So the reason I'm saying this is it may be harder this year than before to figure out who's the most electable candidate. Mm. But I predict that at some point during this process, whatever they're debating and whatever the stories are, there will be a move by people who think they can influence the process to settle on the one that's most electable, because they figure they already got what they need. They got the Congress, and they just want to win the White House so bad they can, I get that. I mean, I understand that. But that's what makes it, for an outsider who doesn't understand all the ins and outs of it, it'll make it difficult to predict. Because I think they don't know. Do they need somebody who's new? Do they need somebody who's seasoned? Do they need somebody who's got a forward-leaning position on immigration, or will it disillusion their people and stay home? Do they need all this kind of, they got all these decisions to make, but in the end, it's going to come down to who's the most electable candidate, because they want to win.
Well, that's probably right. That's where Republican voters generally go. Mitt Romney, of all their candidates last time, was probably the most electable, even though That's a pretty low bar given the candidates they were fielding last time. When it comes to the candidates they're fielding this time, I'm going to show a couple examples. One is Chris Christie was over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, talking to George Stephanopoulos, and you can see he's trying to position himself as the person who can beat Hillary Clinton. And first I'm going to show an introduction that sort of talks about that from George Stephanopoulos, where he talks about also how Chris Christie's had to come back from Bridgegate, that he had this big fall, and now he's trying to do a comeback over in this clip.
That brings us to our exclusive interview with a Republican who guarantees he can beat Hillary, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie.
I love you, New Jersey. Thank you very much.
After his big re-election in 2013, he had the hot hand. But all that changed after Bridgegate.
I am embarrassed and humiliated by the conduct of some of the people on my team.
Now Christie's on the comeback trail. Iowa, South Carolina, New Hampshire.
You're all going to see a lot of me.
With some tough love for fellow Republicans.
My party, quite frankly, has been guilty in some respects of speaking in a way that doesn't sound very welcoming.
Striking specifics on topics like Social Security and a promise to run his own way.
You never have to wonder, ever have to wonder what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling.
And Governor Christie,
I'll let folks know where I'm going to be.
last time around you said you weren't ready to be president.
Wait,
Jeb Bush.
Sorry, I started the next clip without doing any transition between them. That next clip that I just started by mistake is where George Stephanopoulos asks Chris Christie to differentiate himself from the person who's probably the biggest rival for the niche she's going for, who's Jeb Bush, as the more centrist person who can actually defeat Hillary. That's what Jeb Bush is going for too, and you'll see that Chris Christie, one of the big arguments he makes is that Jeb Bush, when he was governor, had a legislature of the same party, but Chris Christie's had to deal with the Democratic legislature, so that he is like a fighter and knows how, he's ready to fight in D.C. But one of the strange things about that argument is that there is a Republican Congress in Washington, D.C. right now. This is like an argument that is out of date since 2014, I think, but maybe Chris Christie isn't up on who's in control of Congress in Washington, D.C., but here's the clip.
I'll let folks know where I'm going to be.
Last time around you said you weren't ready to be president. Jeb Bush is getting in tomorrow. What do you offer that he doesn't?
Well, listen, one thing is just what I talked about. I've worked with the legislature of the other party for the last nearly 6 years now, and we've had some significant accomplishments along with significant disagreements. You need to learn how to do that if you're going to be in Washington, D.C.
Jeb Bush did that as a governor, didn't he?
No, he had a legislature of his own party, George. It's a much different thing. And listen, I have great respect for Jeb. He was a very good governor. But if you're asking one of the things that makes me different is I think I'm combat ready for Washington, D.C., and you need to be in order to know how to work with people, how to bring people together. I've done that in New Jersey in a way that led to me getting 61% of the vote for re-election. The fact is that people know I know how to bring folks together and how to fight when I need to, and I think sometimes with folks who are in red states, they don't have as much experience.
You're also laying down...
I don't know. That argument didn't make that much sense to me, although I guess you could say he's arguing that having a legislature of the opposite party just makes him a fighter, even though when he gets to the presidency in 2017, he won't have to fight with a Republican Congress. I assume he's not claiming that he's going to win, but he's going to lose the Congress in the 2016 election. That doesn't really make much sense. Anyway, that was him trying to differentiate himself from Jeb Bush, who is expected to announce his candidacy tomorrow. And there's a little preview of that I promised from Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press. This is the one that he mirrors his Clinton introduction, Hillary Clinton introduction, saying Hillary wanted to be more Rodham than Clinton. Here's Chuck Todd saying Jeb Bush wants to be more Jeb than Bush in this clip.
Another famous last name who's had a rocky rollout will finally make his campaign official on Monday at Miami-Dade College. He's selling himself as more Jeb than Bush, but he is borrowing one thing from his brother,
compassionate conservatism.
My core beliefs start with the premise that the most vulnerable in our society should be in the front of the line, not the back. And as governor, I had a chance to act on that core belief.
Back in December, when Bush first hinted he might run, his campaign was expected to be a juggernaut, generating shock and awe, vacuuming up money, pushing out candidates left and right. Instead, he is barely clinging to frontrunner status, with 15 Republicans battling him to lead the party. Bush is also struggling with conservatives, thanks in part to two big issues, Common Core and immigration. Then there's his brother's legacy. Some Republicans believe he has to find a way to distance himself.
This is going to be a change election. And at the end of the day, Republican voters want somebody who can prosecute a case without being wrapped up in these debates from the past.
So that was just a little news report from Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press. But as I said before, on CNN's State of the Union, they had the reporter Dana Bash, who I thought might be the new host of State of the Union, but apparently isn't. She was over in Eastern Europe talking to Jeb Bush, who was on this European tour, to show that he can be a leader on the world stage or whatever. They all go on these European tours. And she asked him basically who Jeb Bush is and, you know, how is he different from his brother. And, you know, he talks about, first he kind of says he's the decider during this answer. And then he also talks about being an introvert and having to show his heart. And anyway, I'll talk about that a little more if you see that clip over here.
Your friends recently said to me, one of your challenges is for you to become known as Jeb and not just another Bush. What does that mean? Who is Jeb Bush?
Well, Jeb is different than George, and Jeb is who he is. My life story is different, and I got to do that when I ran as governor, and I got to share my passion for service when I was governor, and telling that story is going to be part of this. I don't have to disassociate myself from my family. I love them, but I know that for me to be successful, I'm going to have to show my heart, tell my story.
Can you give me one little example of who Jeb Bush is that makes you feel like you are the guy who people should choose to be president?
Well, I can make decisions. I've made tough decisions. I have a life experience that's full of warts and full of successes. It's something that I think has been lacking in the presidency, is have someone who's been tempered by life. And along the way, I'll get to share that. And it's I've lived overseas, I've worked overseas, I've been in business, I've served as governor, I give back to my community. I have a great relationship with my wife and family, and I'll get to share all that. Part of that's important. It's something that took a little getting used to for me personally, to be able to show my heart, because I'm kind of introverted, but it's important to do.
One last.
An introverted president. I'm not sure that's really possible, but I don't know. Is he really introverted? And I'll be interested to see how Jeb Bush's campaign plays out. It hasn't been that strong so far, but he's generally considered one of the 3 or 4 in the top tier. What is it? Jeb Bush, Scott Walker, and Marco Rubio. Maybe John Kasich, who hasn't even gotten into the race, might be in the top tier. And then they're the only ones who could really win a lot of, that's the conventional wisdom anyway, from several sources I saw today. But one of the candidates who they say can't really win is Senator Lindsey Graham, but he's been good for, I don't know, comic relief, or he makes a lot of jokes in his campaign. And he had this weird comment, he's not married, so he'd be a bachelor president. I heard he was on the radio somewhere or something and said, sorry, I'm not gay or something, because that's one of the rumors about him. But he did come out in favor of the dignity of single people when he was talking to John Dickerson about his strange comment that he'd have a rotating first lady, which is kind of a strange turn of phrase. And you can see John Dickerson asked him about it on CBS's Face the Nation, and got, like I said, sort of a rousing defense of the single in this clip.
Final question. You said because you're not married, you might have a rotating first lady. Have you gotten any offers on that front?
Yeah, we have. But here's what I'm going to do as president. Raise my right hand,
promised to defend America from all foreign enemies, foreign and domestic. And I think I'm the best prepared to protect this country. I am single like many other people. If you've got a good marriage, God bless you. If you're single, there's nothing wrong with you. The last time I checked, there was nothing in the Constitution or at the White House said single people need not apply. I'm going to be a ready-to-go commander-in-chief, protect everybody, single people included.
All right, Senator, thank you. We'll be back in a moment.
Thank you. So, like I said, rousing defense of single people. And then this is a quick clip from a show I don't normally take clips from. I just happened to see this this morning. It's Up with Steve Kornacki, and it's on Saturdays and Sunday mornings on MSNBC. They had several clips from, there's this big summit going on in Utah where Mitt Romney is introducing the candidates to the big money people and letting them play, like, I think it's like racquetball and Pilates and skeet shooting, or at least two of those three things are actually happening. And they had their reporter, Casey Hunt, talk to some of the candidates, and she asked Lindsey Graham about where he might go on dates if he were president, and you get one of Lindsey Graham's jokes I was talking about over in this clip.
Mitt Romney hosted Summit this weekend. Stay with us.
If you were elected president, where would you take someone on a date as president? There have been a couple presidents who got married in the White House.
You know, I haven't really thought about that. Let's rule out Syria and Iraq.
No dates to Syria and Iraq. Okay, well, I don't know. Like I said, is Lindsey Graham just in the campaign for comic relief, or does he have a real path to the nomination and the presidency? I don't see it, but you can let me know down in the comment section if you see a pathway for Lindsey Graham to be president of the United States. I want to show one more clip on what's going on with the Republicans. This is, like I said, Jake Tapper has taken over as host of CNN's State of the Union. And at the end of the show, he revealed that he started off in politics as a political cartoonist. And so he wants to do political cartoons as part of the new State of the Union. He called it a State of the Cartoonion, as you'll see. And he's going to draw a little cartoon about this New York Times story about Marco Rubio this week in this clip.
Welcome back. On the show, I'm a political anchor and reporter, but what you might not know is that I started out as a political cartoonist. The political cartoon is one of the oldest and most enduring forms of expression in democracy. Sometimes it's satire, sometimes it's protest, sometimes it's just fun. We want to keep it alive, which is why every Sunday we're going to bring you one. I present to you State of the Cartoonian. Senator and presidential candidate Marco Rubio found himself in what you might call a boatload of brouhaha this week. A report by the New York Times about his finances suggested he'd blown $80,000 in what the Times called a luxury speedboat. It turned out it was more like a fishing boat. Then there's the issue of the long arm of the law. The New York Times also wrote of 17 traffic citations for the senator and his wife, though most of the citations were hers. Over the course of 18 years, the real number of speeding tickets for the senator was 4. Rubio tried to shrug it all off and managed to fundraise $100,000 from the controversy and so-called liberal media coverage. Who says he's bad with money? Before we go...
I don't know. What do you think? I mean, he can draw. I mean, I can see how he was a political cartoonist. I can't draw at all, so... to get something, to use a pen to create an image that looks something like Marco Rubio, that's an actual skill that I guess it fits into State of the Union. I don't know. I'll wait to see more episodes of State of Cartoonian and reserve my judgment. Let me know if you want me to take more clips of State of Cartoonian or if you think that it's frivolous or not worth it. Now I'm actually going to move on to 5 clips I have on the issue of race. Before I get to like the McKinney pool party and the criminal justice system, I want to show one more clip of Jake Tapper. I mentioned he did this interview, this long sort of town hall interview with Bill Clinton, and one of the segments was devoted to talking about the good works of the Clinton Foundation. And in that segment, he asked Bill Clinton about the troubles in Baltimore and, you know, how to get those unemployed youth jobs, especially minority youth, how to get them jobs. But what I thought was really lacking in this questioning from Jake Tapper was any mention of how the policies of the Clinton administration, the Bill Clinton administration, are responsible for the devastation in the inner cities. The crime bill with the mandatory minimums and the war on drugs. You know, if you look over my left shoulder here, you'll see The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, where she talks at great length about how policies from Democrats and the Clinton administration are kind of responsible for a lot of these problems. That doesn't come up at all in this clip with Jake Tapper talking about Baltimore. So I'm showing it at the beginning of the race topic just to show a not very good discussion of some of the important issues over in this clip.
One of your breakout sessions this week is about connecting youth with employment. If you look at a city like Baltimore, where there's been a lot of press coverage recently, the unemployment rate for young black men in Baltimore between 20 and 24 is 37%. For their white equivalents, it's 10%. But you can't look at Baltimore, where Martin O'Malley was the mayor and where there have been a lot of Democrats and Democratic rule trying to improve the lot of people in Baltimore, where they spend a great deal per pupil. You can't look at that city and say, nobody's been trying. What are some of the things that can be done that haven't been tried?
Well, first, I believe we ought to try to accelerate development opportunities and jobs near where these young people live. You know, the Baltimore's great shining jewel of a company is now Under Armour. It's a local company with a local leader who didn't move the jobs out of Baltimore. I think there's 1,700 jobs there, something like that. I'd go get that guy from Under Armour and I would bring all these leaders and a lot of these kids in, and I'd figure out what to do and come up with a strategy. And you don't have to solve it all overnight. You just have to make it better than it was. What's killing all these communities is that everybody thinks every tomorrow is going to be like yesterday. You're toast. You can deal with poverty, adversity, anything, as long as they think it could be different. The Baltimore thing came on the heels of what happened in Ferguson and what happened in New York City and all these other places. And there's a big national movement about whether the lives of young African-American men count, you know.
Hashtag Black Lives Matter, yeah.
Yeah. You can't have a bunch of people walking around with guns. I used to tell people when we did Bosnia, Kosovo, anything like that, you get enough people with weapons around and there will be unintended consequences. People will make mistakes. People will do wrong. Things happen. To hold a community together, you've got to have a high level of community trust. If somebody that's in your family gets shot, you want an answer from somebody you know. And you want to be able to ask questions and get them answered and resolve that. So I think in addition to the economics, we need to look at the places in America where these things happen and they don't drive people into the streets because they actually trust the process for resolving them.
So you heard Jake Tapper sort of talk about how Martin O'Malley and Democratic policies might be responsible, but he never, in that segment or in any of the long interview that they showed on CNN State of the Union this morning, he never asked Bill Clinton about the Clinton administration responsibility for mass incarceration and the drug war and the crime bill that passed that Bill Clinton signed. And so I thought that was something that was missing. And you can actually see some mention of that over on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, where Bill Maher started off talking about the head of the police department in New York, William Bratton, saying that it's hard to hire African-American officers because too many of them have police records, and how that is missing the whole point, that the reason so many in the African-American community have these records is because of over-policing. And then there's this progressive activist, Alexis Goldstein, who was on, who specifically mentions Democrats who were responsible for that over in this clip.
Ooh, I like Bill Bratton. I know him.
Yeah.
He used to be out
I don't
here.
like Bill Bratton.
You don't like him?
No.
Okay. I mean, maybe I don't like everything he does, but he is the police chief. It's a tough job in New York. They asked him why there weren't more blacks on the force. He said, so many of them have spent time in jail, and as such, we can't hire them. But that's part of because the police
over-police communities of color, even though communities of color do drugs at the same rate or less than white people do drugs, right? I'm sure we have some maybe drug users on this panel, right? And so we over-incarcerate people of color in this country. So, surprise, you can't hire black cops.
When are conservatives going to realize that so many of the problems that they abhor are caused by the policies they support? You know, why aren't there more black kids with role models at home and dads? Because you put them all in jail.
But just to be fair, liberals have been tough on crime for a while, so I think Democrats share a big portion of that blame as well.
So yeah, like I said, it's good to see, at least on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, that they mentioned like the liberal tough on crime policies that are in the new Jim Crow that by Michelle Alexander that I was talking about before. And another clip on this whole race issue that I wanted to play, also from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. It was the only one of the shows that I regularly take clips from that actually covered the McKinney, Texas pool party viral video. I made a video. You can see a link down in the video description to my video on the Fox News defends McKinney cop who brutalized black teen, I think is something like that. And if you haven't seen that, I put together a whole bunch of Fox News anchors and pundits defending this cop who then ended up apologizing and resigning. Well, that wasn't on any of the Sunday morning shows. It wasn't last week because it was still like building on the internet and hadn't become a big story, and it was all over the news during the week, but it kind of like disappeared by the Sunday shows. The only place I saw it covered was on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. Here's he talked about what Megyn Kelly said. That I showed that clip in my video about the Fox News defense of the McKinney cop, where she said that she shifted the blame over to the victim. And here's Bill Maher talking about that on Friday in his monologue in this clip.
But, of course, now we're at the inevitable stage where Rush Limbaugh and Fox News try to figure out how the victim was really a thug who had it coming. Megyn Kelly was talking sensibly the other day about the 15-year-old girl who had her face pushed down into the lawn, when suddenly Megyn was overtaken by clueless white girl syndrome. And she said the girl was no saint either. No saint, yeah, because she lingered. And it reminded me, is that, you know, we think of Megyn Kelly as the sane one over there at Fox News. That's just because she's surrounded by Hannity and Bill O'Reilly. She's like the blonde dragon girl on Game of Thrones. Everyone else is a zombie or a dwarf or fucking their sister, so she looks normal.
And that last clip, of course, or that last part of the clip is for you Game of Thrones fans out there who may be about to watch or having watched or recorded, or I'm going to watch later, the finale of this season of Game of Thrones. Don't give me any spoilers. I don't want to hear. I guess I can't look in the... I guess if you're watching the show as a live show, you probably haven't seen the Game of Thrones finale, and maybe you're not even a fan, but I want to show a couple more clips on the race issue, not having to do with the McKinney pool party. If you want to see coverage of the McKinney pool party, like I said, look at my video that I put a link down to in the video description. Next clip I want to show is actually Jeff Ross, and the comedian Jeff Ross, who's kind of famous for the Comedy Central roasts, was on talking to Bill Maher because he had a special on Saturday, which I watched, where he went into a county jail in Texas and roasted some of the inmates. And I almost showed a clip from that, but instead I'm going to show a clip from Real Time where they talk about how you forget that these are human beings and that we have really dehumanized our people in county jail. I spent a lot of time in county jails as a public defender talking to people helping them get through their charges and usually come up with a plea bargain, occasionally try to fight things with a trial. Sometimes they even got charges dismissed, but mostly just helping people get through their plea bargains and do their time or whatever. And I think it's important to remember that they're human beings, and forgetting they're human beings and that they deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, I think, is one of the big reasons we have problems in the criminal justice system, as I've discussed in my video about whether the criminal justice system is racist, classist, or both. That's one of my big conclusions. I put a link down to that in the video description too, but here's Bill Maher and Jeff Ross talking about that in the penultimate clip of the evening here.
And it wasn't until I got there that I started to find some compassion. I mean, obviously there's some real dirtbags in prison and they don't deserve a show, but 90% of the people that I perform for are coming out of jail someday. They're our neighbors.
See, I thought you had that before you went to the jail.
No.
I thought you did this because you understood that our criminal justice system is out of control. We put more people in jail than any other country in the world. 1 out of 100 Americans. That's insane.
It's a national emergency. I had no idea how severe it was. As I started to research my material, I wanted to write like a roast, a specific act just for the inmates.
Wow.
These facts, we have more black men locked up right now than were slaves in 1840.
That's right.
This is awful.
No, I know. It's crazy.
There's more jails and prisons in America than there are colleges and universities. We say we're a free country, but we're locking up people for minor drug offenses.
Right.
And
that's, yes. And what I love about it is it humanizes them. And that's what we somehow got it in our head back in the Law and Order, Dirty Harry era.
Right.
That once you put them there, you don't have to think about them.
Right.
They're inhuman. And of course, you know, yes, there are of course some people who are just irretrievable.
Right.
But most prisoners they're human. We call them correctional institutions. Did you see a lot of correcting going on?
Yeah, my opening line was, "Where my murder is at." And about 5 people raised their hand, and I moved back a little bit. But to be honest with you, there's a lot of people there that deserve a second chance. And a lot of people are just put away. Back in the 70s, Wayne Dickey, who's the jail administrator down there, he explained to me that back in the 70s, America closed up mental institutions. Hundreds of thousands of beds got closed up.
Right.
So these jails and prisons are now de facto mental hospitals. We just sort of put people out of mind, like lock them up, forget about them. They're human dust. There's something...
Yeah, and that's the thing, human dust, the dregs of society. That's what we put in our jails, and that's how we treat people in our jails. And a lot of those people need more help than they need punishment. Not everybody, like they were saying. There are certainly people there who are dangerous and need to be cordoned off. But like I said, if you look at the new Jim Crow about the racist criminal justice system, or here you have Matt Taibbi's The Divide, talks about how poor people and the lower classes are, especially the bottom 20%, are really preyed upon by the criminal justice system. That's really important. And before I leave the show on the question of race, I want to show this interesting montage from CBS's Face the Nation. John Dickerson decided that they've been showing commencement speeches, and in this one they show how Michelle Obama has been addressing the issue of racism in commencement speeches she's made this year. These are clips from 3 different speeches she's made, and I think they're definitely worth watching for the last clip of the show tonight here.
Face the Nation takes note of commencement speeches across the country that we think are important. This year we're focusing on a set of speeches by First Lady Michelle Obama. Her reflections on race in 3 different graduation speeches are a departure for her and come at a time when the country is struggling to understand and find solutions in the conflicts between the police and African American communities.
The world won't always see you in those caps and gowns. They won't know how hard you worked and how much you sacrificed to make it to this day. Instead, they will make assumptions about who they think you are based on their limited notion of the world. And my husband and I know how frustrating that experience can be. We've both felt the sting of those daily slights throughout our entire lives. the folks who crossed the street in fear of their safety, the clerks who kept a close eye on us in all those department stores, the people at formal events who assumed we were the help, and those who have questioned our intelligence, our honesty, even our love of this country. I know you all can dig deep and keep on fighting to fulfill your own dreams, because graduates, in the end, you all are the ones responsible for changing the narrative about our communities. And with every word you speak, with every choice you make, with the way you carry yourself each day, you are rewriting the story of our communities. And that's a burden that President Obama and I proudly carry every single day in the White House. Because we know that everything we do and say can either confirm the myths about folks like us, or it can change those myths. Today, it is no longer remarkable to see two beautiful black girls walking their dogs on the south lawn of the White House. That's just the way things are now. See, graduates, this is what happens when you turn your attention outward and decide to brave the noise and engage yourself in the struggles of our time.
So, I don't know, in a way I think that may be a preview of what we're going to see from Barack and Michelle Obama in the Obama post-presidency, that they're going to address issues of race a lot more head-on than President Obama, when he was running and as president, had to be non-polarizing in terms of race, and even then Fox News accuses him of racial polarization all the time. But anyway, that's the last clip I want to show you tonight. That's the show. I hope you appreciate the 31 clips I picked out, and it kind of shows you what the corporate media thought was important in the news this week, and I hope it left you a little more informed about that, or at least more informed about the news or the corporate news as much as it is. If you want to help support my channel through donations, you can hover your mouse over the corner of the video here, and you have a chance to either click on the fan funding, which is a donation if you live in one of 5 countries, I think, a one-time donation, or below that there's a card that you can click on for the patron, to be a patron on Patreon. Also on the Patreon page for this video, I will save all the live comments. I think we peaked at around 100 people, and I enjoy all of the live comments that I read while I play the clips. So thank you for those who joined me live, and if you're watching this as a recorded show, you can let me know also what you think of the clips I played and the clips I chose and the topics for this week, and you can watch to see if I have time to put another edited, produced video out next week like I did last week. I think I'll be able to do several this summer. If not, I should at least have an excerpt video out, and then next week I will, even though it's Father's Day, I will be working and creating a show for you at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, which is Greenwich Mean Time minus 7 hours. Until then, or until my next video is up, I guess I'll be seeing you all around the internet.